Hey guys, I'm Bonnie from Bonnie and Blythe, and today's tutorial is going to teach you how to make a knit t-shirt. It's one of the most basic articles of clothing that we all wear, and having this little skill in your back pocket will come in handy time and time again. All you need for this tutorial is some knit fabric, whatever you want to make your shirt out of, plus an existing t-shirt that fits you or a child that you want to make a new shirt for. Now, a traditional knit t-shirt usually looks like this. You have a front bodice, a back bodice, and then two sleeve pieces that are known as set-in sleeves. So you sew the sleeves separately and then set them into the bodice. The t-shirt we're going to be making today is a little bit different and a whole lot easier, and let me show you how. We're actually going to be making the front and back bodice only and making what they call a dolman sleeve, or a sleeve that is part of the bodice. It's so much easier, you don't have to worry about messing with sleeves, and you're done in about half the time. Now, you can use your existing t-shirt to trace the new t-shirt right onto your new fabric, or you can do what I do and get a big piece of butcher paper, poster board, whatever you have lying around to create a pattern so that you can then make a t-shirt over and over and over again with that same pattern. You ready to do it? Let's go. First, grab your butcher paper or whatever you want to trace your pattern onto and lay it out. Fold your store-bought t-shirt in half lengthwise so that the fold runs down the center of the shirt from the neckline to the hem. Trace the t-shirt, remembering to add a seam allowance around the shoulder and sides of the t-shirt, and a hem allowance around the hem of the sleeve and bottom of the shirt. For the sleeve, just ignore the existing sleeve seam and trace around the whole thing. If your shirt has fitted sleeves, be sure to add extra allowance around the top and bottom of the sleeves to get a more relaxed fit. Dolman sleeves are traditionally pretty loose. Trace around the back neckline and also mark the depth of the front neckline, then cut out your pattern. You can choose to cut out two pattern pieces, one along the back neckline and one along the front, or just one pattern piece and mark both necklines. Be sure to also mark your pattern with the title of the garment, that is Dolman Sleeve t-shirt, the size, and where to cut on the fold. Also mark the front and back neckline if needed. Now fold your fabric with the stretch running side to side as opposed to up and down, and lay the pattern down with the straight edge along the fold. You'll want to make sure that stretch is running horizontally across the body. At this point, you can trace your pattern with chalk or fabric pen, or simply hold it in place and cut out your fabric around it. Now repeat for the front bodice, this time following the front neckline marking, or using the front pattern piece if you made two. Here you can see the sleeves of the t-shirts, the bottom hem, and the front and back necklines. And now it's time to sew. Lay your bodice pieces flat, one on top of each other with the right sides together. Then sew along the shoulder seams, as well as along the side seams and under the armhole, using a stretch stitch or serger. This is what it will look like when done. Note that if using a serger, the underarm portion might be a little trickier to sew. Just pull the curve as straight as you can while sewing. Next, we'll need to hem the sleeve and bottom of the shirt, either using a zigzag stitch or a double needle. I'm going to skip the bottom hem at this point because I'll be cutting the shirt shorter in the next video to make it into a dress. And after that, we'll attach the neck binding. Be sure to press the seams you just sewed before moving on. After hemming, we'll measure the neck opening to determine how long to cut our binding. As you can see, I've turned my measuring tape on its side to get an accurate measurement. My neck opening measured 17.5 inches. I always make note of this measurement on my pattern for future reference. And now I need to subtract a bit off this measurement so that my binding fits nice and tight. I usually subtract about 1 inch, but since this fabric was a really stretchy spandex blend, this time I took off 1.5 inches and cut my binding 16 inches long and 2.5 inches wide. The width of your binding is totally up to you. If you'd like a thinner one, go ahead and cut it 1.5 inches or somewhere in between. Once you've cut out your binding strip, fold it in half widthwise and stitch together the short ends. Then turn the binding right side out, press that seam flat, and fold the entire loop in half lengthwise, and press again. Now we'll attach it to the t-shirt's neck opening. Begin by finding the center of the bodice back and place a pin in the neckline here. Pin the seam in the binding to this center back, ensuring that the raw edges of the shirt and binding are even and the binding is pinned to the outside of the bodice. Now mark the center front of the binding by placing a pin there. Do the same to the center front of the bodice and pin these two together at this point. Finally, pin the remainder of the binding strip to the shoulders of the bodice by stretching the binding evenly so that it matches the neck opening. Remember, we want the binding to be slightly smaller than the neck opening. Once this is done, it's time to sew the two together. My best tip for doing this successfully is to first baste the binding and shirt together, while gently stretching the binding to fit. If everything looks good after that, you can securely stitch the two together with a stretch stitch or serger. If the binding looks wonky, too loose, or too tight, you can adjust or even recut the binding and try again without having to pick out lots of stitches. And that's it. I hope you guys love this tutorial. I love making t-shirts and I hope you do too. Be sure to watch the next episode in this series where I take an existing t-shirt, like the one you just made, or a store-bought shirt and add a circle skirt to it. You can see that by clicking in the link below or right here. Thanks for watching. Bye.